Otherwise, we sum up then at the end of the day. If not, then I introduce you Francisca Concetta. So she works at the University of Venice, and she will talk about fostering university students with communicative competence. Done.
Okay. Thank you, Ivana, and thank you for the invitation. Today I'm gonna talk about multimodal communicative competence and how I try to foster it with my university students. So I'm going to give you some very practical examples of what I do with them in class. So let's see if it works. Okay, great. So I'm going to provide you with a definition of what I mean by multimodal communicative competence. And I'm going to talk about the learning context where I teach. And as I said, I'm going to give you two sample materials I created for my students. And then I'm going to draw some conclusions on the feasibility of what I do in class. Okay. Well, by multimodal communicative competence, I mean the ability to understand the combined potential of various modes for making meaning, which is necessary to make sense of and construct texts. And this is Royce's definition of multimodal communicative competence, which I see it as a sort of synonym of multiliteracy, as provided by the New London Group back in 1996, but adapted to second and foreign language contexts. In this regard, Royce says that it is the extension of Heinz's 1992 concept of communicative competence beyond its traditional and narrow linguistic view and incorporates a recognition of the need to focus on multimodal literacy. Right. I have a course at Ca' Foscari, and I entitled the course Access to Discourse in English Through Text Analysis. And my students are second-year students in the degree course in Language, Civilization and the Science of Language. This is a bachelor degree program. At the end of the program, students are supposed to become translators, mediators, they're supposed to become language consultants, and they are supposed to work in different areas. And they, in the second year, they have 30 hours with me. This is what is called modulo, or module. This is what Ilaria mentioned this morning. But they also have 100 hours with native speakers, where they are trained in various language skills, such as speaking, writing, and things like that. Okay, the objectives of my course are helping the students develop their multimodal communicative competence to become competent text users. I don't know how familiar you are with the Common European Framework. It was mentioned this morning, but in the Common European Framework, they said that learners of a foreign language needed in 2001 needed to become competent language users. I think that nowadays they need to become competent text users. That is, someone who is capable of understanding text, and nowadays we have plenty of digital text where different semiotic resources are combined, but also they need to be able to produce effective texts. I don't know what happens in your courses, but there are, in Ca' Foscari, we have some courses where students are asked to prepare a PowerPoint presentation. And this is not easy. They need to understand that they cannot write everything on the PowerPoint. They need to use images, okay? They can use animation, but animation needs to be used carefully. So they need to design their presentation in the right way. And so these are skills they need to acquire. Another objective of my course is that of providing the student with a meta-language to describe how different text types are constructed to create meaning and achieve special effects. So they need to learn to describe texts. The theoretical framework I adopted is mainly the systemic functional approach. So basically Halliday, the work done by Kressler, Van Leeuwen, and Bolgen-Thibault. This is the framework. Going back to my course objectives, I said that students need to be equipped with a meta-language to describe the various text types and how they create meaning. And this is in line, again, with the New London Group's manifesto, which says that teachers and students need a meta-language for talking about language, images, text, and meaning-making interactions. The primary purpose of the meta-language should be to identify and explain differences between texts and relate these to the context of culture and situation in which they seem to work. So they need to be able to understand the text they are analyzing, but also to connect it with the context of situation and the context of culture in which the text is produced. And this is not easy. This is not always easy. Okay. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. Before starting, I'd just like to let you know that at the beginning, students are provided with some basics of systemic functional grammar. So they know what a metafunction is, what the 3 metafunctions are, and the like. And so, and they are also introduced to genre theory, in particular Martin's theory of genre. And they are asked to analyze different text types. And I will start with procedures because, in my opinion, they are pretty easy. And the first example I give them is the recipe genre. Students should be familiar with the recipe, especially nowadays that we have many TV cooking shows, okay, MasterChef, Top Chef, and whatever. So, at the beginning, they are asked to analyze the text schematic structure, so the various stages the text is composed of, and also the realizational patterns of each stage, so how each stage is realized. So in the case of the recipe, each stage is mainly realized by language, obviously. Then we move on from the recipe to the legal instructions genre, which is a totally, it is still a procedural text, but it is totally different. As you can see, the first, well, they are similar in the sense that they have similar stages. You have, in the recipe, you have a list of ingredients, and similarly, in the legal instruction, you have a list of the pieces you need, and you also you have a method section. And they are realized differently. The T sections are realized differently. While the recipe relies heavily on written language, the legal instructions rely heavily on visuals. Okay. So they are asked to analyze a page of a manual from a Lego set. Okay, what I like to do with okay, here this slide shows you the importance of visuals in this text. Notice that the bricks, the various pieces are realized with images, whereas here the many animations. Go back. Okay. And here you can actually see that the method section is realized with the use of vectors, which identify processes. Okay, other processes are implied because you don't see what the person did to build, in this case, the Hoover, but you actually see the result. Okay. Right, let's see how I ask students to analyze text. I like using questions, and usually these are questions that aim to raise their awareness of the multimodal nature of this text. So, text T is an extract from the legal instructions of The Simpsons House. The extract exemplifies the legal instruction genre, which aims to instruct readers how to fit together bricks to build things. read the extract and answer the following questions. What use of language is made in this extract? Okay, don't know. What use of visuals is made in this extract? How are processes and participants realized in the extract? To answer this question, you may want to compare the image of the house on this page with the one on the previous page. Because in this way, by comparing the two images, they can actually see that the houses are different because new bricks have been added. The last question, what effects does the interplay of the various semiotic resources have on readers? In your opinion, if language had been used in lieu of visuals, would the effects on readers have been the same? Okay. And what I ask the students to do is that of having a look at the list of pieces you need for this specific stage and trying to understand if they can understand what the piece is. I mean, you see, one dark stone grey space skeleton body. What is it? Then one bright red plate, I don't really know how to read it, really. And I wonder whether the Lego engineers know exactly the name of each pieces. So, and then I tell the students, okay, look at the image, which is the affect. And then they conclude that obviously the image is more straightforward than the list of pieces in the language form, so to say. Okay. And and I asked them, why do you think this is more straightforward? And I asked them to consider the fact that when you build a set, you might have a lot of different pieces. So you need to find the piece very quickly. And in the case of the Simpsons house, the set has 2,500 pieces. Imagine looking for the dark stone grey space skeleton body. I mean, it will take you ages. Okay. Right. So this is the first text. In my course, I deal not only with, let's say, general texts, but also with, we talk about scientific discourse, because at the end of the degree course, they need to write a dissertation thesis. So they need to learn how to write in good academic English. Okay. So we talk about scientific discourse. They are introduced to the different types of scientific discourses and their situational characteristics. I've used Gotti as a starting point. So we talk about fully specialized discourse, pedagogical discourse, popularization. And we also talk about the lexicogrammatical features of fully specialized discourse. So the use of discipline-related technical terms, complex noun phrases, passive constructions, and the fact that scientific discourse is lexically dense. And so we analyze different text types, and I also use pedagogical animations. So this is an example of the text I use. This is an animation which supplements a textbook on anatomy and physiology, and it is about the cell cycle. I'm going to show you a very short extract.
During prophase, the chromosomes become visible and condense, becoming shorter and thicker. Each identical copy of a single chromosome is called a sister chromatid. The nuclear envelope breaks down and spindle fibers form as microtubules grow out of the centrioles that move to opposite poles of the cell.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why, but there was no sync between the soundtrack and the video. But anyway, as you can see, this kind of animation relies on the interplay of various semiotic resources: language, written and spoken language, movement, colors, what else? Pardon?
Shapes.
Shapes, yeah. there was nothing I wanted to say, I just forgot, sorry. Anyway, so I like giving students multimodal transcriptions. I don't remember who this morning introduced the concept of multimodal transcription.
Yes.
Okay, Sandra. Yeah, so this is a multimodal transcription based on the work done by Borges and Thibault, but there are many other types of multimodal transcriptions. And they initially, at the very beginning, they were created for analytical purposes. But what I try to do is using this tool with students so that it becomes a sort of pedagogical tool. Okay, here as you can see you have a series of columns and a series of rows. The first column indicates the time in seconds. Then you have the visual frame. Then I decided to annotate the most relevant elements for my purposes. So I've got the various processes, the participants, and the soundtrack. So I asked the students to analyze the transcription, to focus on the transcription, to understand how the text works. Then again, I asked them very specific questions. In this case, I asked them, in your opinion, what is the function of the analytical process shown in time from 74 to 75? Is there a connection between this visual process and the soundtrack? To answer these questions, you may want to consider the discourse type this animation is an example of. So in this case, they need to connect the analysis with, in a way, the context of situation in which this text is produced. And then if they have a closer look of the visual frame and the soundtrack, they do understand that what is stated in the soundtrack is in a way replicated in the visual frame. So the two resources contribute to help learners, the students, the anatomy students, to better understand what is stated in the video. So they reflect on the text, they draw conclusions. Okay? So in a way, they develop what I hope, this is what I hope, they develop their multimodal communicative competence I mentioned at the very beginning. Okay, conclusions. Okay, why should language professionals foster language learners' multimodal communicative competence? Well, the answer is obvious. We mentioned this this morning. Because communication is increasingly multimodal in nature, and language learners should be equipped with the tools to cope with that. At the end of my course, well actually over the course, I noticed that the students developed a greater awareness of the effects the choice of a given resource over the others, and the combination of two or more resources have on the text's agency. That is the case, for example, of the pedagogical animation. They became more competent in relating the text under analysis with its context of situation. They developed a meta-language to talk about texts, and also they were able to go beyond the text provided and make connections with other kinds of digital text. This is the case of the recipe genre. And some students asked me the difference between the recipe and the cooking tutorials you find online. So, and they noticed that, and they asked, how can we analyze it? What about the stages? What about the list of ingredients you have on the recipe? That is given typically at the very beginning, okay? What happens in the video tutorials? And the like. So they were able, they drew on their personal experience with the digital texts, and they tried to relate their personal experience with what we did in class. These are my references, and that's it. So if you have questions, you can answer them.